actually got a caller. Somebody phoned up. Sort of
that people listen to CiTR.
Yes, sort of get in the ring with us. So, caller, are you there?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I have a very simple question for Mr. Dobie.
Hey, Rick.
So I should identify myself, actually.
Yeah,
I should identify myself, actually. My name is Rick Hebert, and I have been known to write for the paper. But I don't have any ulterior motive here. I just want Bill to answer something that I don't think has been properly addressed.
Sure, no problem.
Thus far?
No problem.
My question is this. If the Publications Board had been set up, say, in the summer of 1992, what could it have done with all the things that were happening with the Ubyssey this spring, notably Francis going on TV and saying it's not illegal. If it's not illegal, you couldn't get caught. The sex issue,
Yes,
et cetera, et cetera.
You're asking me what would the board have prevented that?
No, what could the assuming the board was set up in the summer, last summer, in the same board, same powers, what could it have done?
I think that's extraordinarily difficult to respond to because in order to be paper constituted underneath the board, you have to comply with a broad range of statement of principles and ethics and the like. And also, I think the board would naturally mandate a more cohesive operational structure, so that whether it would be minutes from your staff meetings and the like. And I really think it's difficult to say, well, what would the board have done differently? I don't know. I haven't seen the board.
No, that wasn't the question I posed. The question I posed was what could the board have done?
What could the board have done? I think what the board could have done is ensured that if the Ubyssey wanted to be a collective, that it was running like a collective. I think the board could have ensured that if the students did not like the paper, that the Ubyssey was hearing that. I think it could have.
You can't legislate.
You can't legislate that.
Of a collective, like that isn't the nature of a collective. A collective is like a cloud.
Siobhan, the fact that the farce that the Ubyssey was a collective last year is crap. The Ubyssey is the most
information you were getting about the state of our collective was at best secondhand, and at worst
I am
gossip.
attempting to answer the question, Rick, and the answer is that the board would have ensured a far more responsive newspaper, and I think that's the whole problem with the Ubyssey. The Ubyssey does not respond to students. The Ubyssey does not
legislate accessibility.
No, but you can legislate common sense, and I think that's what's been devoid of the Ubyssey for years.
I just want to make sure that I'm hearing that bill correctly here. So what you're saying that if the pub board had been with the powers that you're giving it, those things would not have been allowed to happen, or the people responsible would have been punished in some way.
I think punished is the wrong word. I think the paper would have had an accountability factor installed. What happened this year when the paper really was flagrant in its abuse of students' support? There was no price to pay. There was no one responsible because it's a collective. There is no price to pay. No, I'm in charge. No, we chose to do this. No, instead I had people from the gays and lesbians upset. I had people from all sides upset. And I think what
I disagree with that.
No, I know, Siobhan. And what I think the board would have done is ensure that the paper was at least in some way accountable for the actions. I don't know the details, Rick. I don't know how the board would have responded. I can't comment. No, you're asking what do I think the board would respond?
If you heard me correctly, it would have been what could they have done?
Well, this is a very hypothetical thing. I think we'll go on.
Well, I'll finish it off though. I think what they could have done is ensured that the Ubyssey truly was a student newspaper, and we knew all year that that's something that should have been ensured from the start. And I think what the board could have done is at least help the Ubyssey collective to really function as a collective.
Okay, well, caller, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Rick.
Okay, sorry, Siobhan, you wanted to respond to that?
I would just like to respond with the responsibility. Francis Foran did not write the transit editorial. Yes, we should have gotten in trouble for that editorial, if only for not having an original thought, because it ran first in the Peak and the Gleaner. And Francis took responsibility. It was not her decision to run it and hers alone. It was a collective decision, if you will, and therefore, when we had someone take responsibility, they were crucified in the media.
Well, I think this all goes back to. I'm not really going to get into argument about governance. That's something that the Ubyssey has to choose from among itself. The point being is that in the eyes of the law and in the eyes of the students, I am the one responsible. And that's what the board is going to have to act as a buffer between, because I don't want to be responsible, because I don't feel comfortable in that environment. And currently, I am ultimately the one responsible. The council is ultimately the one responsible, and that's the whole point of the board.
But they will still ultimately be
yes,
responsible.
of course, but at least they'll interrupt the process. They'll prevent reactions from aggressive politicians. They'll prevent, council taking aggressive action without a lot of thought, because by the time anything gets to council, you can bet that it's been debated to no end in the board. And I think...
Then why are all the appointments that are made to the board, aside from the publications representatives, approved or ratified by council?
Because council cannot incorporate a council or a board that is going to have authority without council recognizing that or empowering these people to have authority. I mean, the Ubyssey, for years, Siobhan, has wanted to live in a world where the AMS writes them a blank check, and then we close our eyes. And the students on this campus are not prepared for that anymore. And this board, I think, is a much more thoughtful response to what really would happen to the Ubyssey, and what almost happened to the Ubyssey with either being shut down or being sued, and I think, or being involved. And I think that's the whole point that council was trying to get across, is that the key to us is providing a student newspaper. The existence of other student newspapers on campus only heightens the fact to us that we as a society are not responding to the needs of our members. And that's all it comes down to. It comes down to the AMS acting in a responsible manner towards the people who are our members.
I agree that you believe that you're truly acting in the best interest of the society.
No, so do 40 other
and
people.
And
So
the
does our
newspaper.
student council. So do people who were elected across the broad range of spectrum, not just the few people
what
who
I'm
voted
saying
for me.
is that the majority of the problems the Ubyssey encountered last year were of an internal nature.
I'm
in
really
order
not
to
interested in
legislate,
talking about the problems the Ubyssey had last year. What I'm
no,
looking
and in
towards
order
is
to
the future.
legislate accessibility to students, you have created a structure that will create an atmosphere of fear, mistrust, and intimidation.
I think it'll create an atmosphere of fear, mistrust, and intimidation, because that's how the Ubyssey, in its old format, or that's how the people who claim they're the Ubyssey, is going to approach the issue. And yes, if you approach the board that way, it will. But what you could get out of the board is a far more powerful lobbying agent for funding for the paper, because they're not writing the articles. I mean,
Well, then why aren't these things written into the document?
because
that
you
has
can't,
become
like
code
you
of
said, you
procedure?
can't write everything into the document. You have to have an inherent faith in the quality of the people being appointed to the board. And it is nothing is perfect, Siobhan, and the Ubyssey is testament to that. I mean, you've got to look at the whole point being is that what we need is a mechanism to address the needs of the paper and the needs of students that is as far away from the political environment of student council and our offices as is possible. Legally, we're never going to get rid of the paper. We're never going to say, no, what they did is not our fault, because it is our fault. If you guys really screw up, the AMS pays the price, And it's about time that the paper started thinking that way. And nonetheless, I think I think the paper will continue. I mean, it's 75 years. There's a tremendous amount of history behind the paper. We're not changing. This board idea is not something new. In fact, it was installed, I think there was a board from 1915 to 1960, and it worked fine for many years, and some of the best years of the Ubyssey.
Yeah, but that particular board was not part of its mandate was to constitute various AMS publications in the broad
Is
sense
the Ubyssey
of
afraid
what
of
it is.
competition?
No, it's not that. Perhaps what we're afraid of is the fact that we could have
What you're afraid of is that you won't have the protected environment that the AMS has provided you with.
coming out of one office.
We
which
only
is
have so
absolutely
much money,
ridiculous.
and I think the board would be common sense to realize that the office cannot support 10 newspapers. I mean, these offices here support 300 members of the radio station. I mean, suffer a bit for. I mean, it's like you seem to think you guys are so hard done by. You have some of the best space in the building. It's like for years there's been this protective atmosphere where the Ubyssey can do anything they wanted. The AMS is going to back them up, and I'm sorry that the receipt's been called. Like, the point has stopped where the AMS now wants accountability in the Ubyssey, and the board is how we're going to get it.
I would just like to go back to one thing you said, the people who claim to be the Ubyssey. Who or what do you define as being the Ubyssey?
There is no Ubyssey right now. The Ubyssey has been written out of the Code of Procedure. It doesn't exist. The AMS owns the copyright to the name Ubyssey, and the board will allocate the right to be the Ubyssey to whichever group of students best proves to serve the needs of students.
So what you've done is to punish the current collective by purging the staff.
That's not purging the staff.
Yes, it's purging
Are you
the staff.
afraid,
What
Siobhan, are you
you've
afraid
done
of
is
being
you've
judged?
said
Are
you are no
afraid of
longer
saying-
the Ubyssey until you play our game and become, and the board will say, yes, you can be the Ubyssey.
Well, it'll be the board's decision, not mine, and that's right. I'm going to call a spade a spade. There is no Ubyssey right now. Unfortunately, for the first time in 74 years, in order to institute the board, the AMS had to write it out of the Code of Procedure. But there's not, the AMS, there are enough students on this campus, whether it's the group that was the Ubyssey before or others who believe in the tradition of journalism that the Ubyssey represents. And that's the point that really comes across to me. When I'm in a council meeting and we're dealing with these issues, I see 10 or 15 people, the same faces, time and time again from the Ubyssey, and no one new, no fresh, no inclusion. I see an exclusionary group, and I think what you're getting. No, let me finish. I think, and then I have to sit around the table and I have to think about the 28,000 students out there, the 45,000 students. They aren't reading our paper. They aren't reading it. They read the campus.
I recall a survey that plant operations did that said 80% of our papers were read at least once.
Well, there's an achievement. Last year, the Campus Times wrote over 600 campus articles. The Ubyssey wrote, if I'm not mistaken, under 100, and they published twice as much. I mean, students want a student newspaper, and they were not getting it. So what the AMS has done is responded to students' request, created a publications board, and the publications board is going to mandate as much as possible, yes, a paper that does meet the needs of students, one that is inclusionary, one that does not exclude people, and one that is democratic, and one that is editorially free. And I think the board, the AMS, protects the editorial freedom of the Ubyssey far more than you would ever find in any commercial press or you would ever find autonomously.
Well, with the same 15 to 20 faces at council meetings, that is...
in fact, because there's only the executives who are... No, sorry, go on.
Because people... we find it hard to find staff members who want to go to council meetings to listen to what council has to say.
Oh, they don't want to listen to what students have to say? I mean, those are the elected representatives of the students.
Yeah, for probably about half the students who voted for them, because they're the only ones who knew what they were voting for.
Well, nonetheless, that's the reality of the situation.
And the reality of the situation is that the Ubyssey is open to any student on campus.
Then
and
why
if they
do I
don't
have
choose
why
to
do
come
I have literally
through the
hundreds
door,
of students talking to the various members of council saying, I walked through the door? There's no way I'm going to get... The Ubyssey won't publish 3 of my articles to make me a staff member. I mean, how is that inclusionary? It's...
I just think that doesn't happen with the regularity that people misunderstand that we have to hold stories.
Well, then the Ubyssey should fault themselves for not making people understand.
Okay, well, it's just a bit after 6 o'clock now, but I'll just ask any parting words then?
I think
on the future.
The parting words on the future is that I think we're looking forward, and students are looking forward to the Ubyssey in the fall, and to a publications board that in most ways will be eliminating these types of discussions, because next time you can interview the chair of the publications board instead of me.
Save you from that. Siobhan, do you think the Ubyssey is going to survive then?
Whatever is published in the fall as the Ubyssey will be fundamentally different, and we're not so sure for the better than it has been. We agree that the Ubyssey has to change, and we would have preferred to make it internal changes and not been subject to outside interference.
Okay.
It's our paper. It's not outside interference. It's the AMS's paper. This is the whole point that I'm trying to get across, Brian. Is really the hypocrisy in the sense that somehow the Ubyssey deserves some special protection. It's not. It is an accountable paper.
But we could sit here and argue for hours, Bill, about whether you were acting as the student government or as the student publisher.
I think we were acting as both, and I think we acted responsibly. Thanks, Brian.
No problem. Okay, well, thanks a lot, Bill Dobie and Siobhan Roantree. Tune in again next week for another edition of Get in the Ring. Coming up next, Out for Kicks.